Hello, and welcome to Job Search 360, How to Conduct an Informational Interview. This is the second section in our module on networking. My name is Rachel Bernard, and I'm the Director of Graduate Career Development with GSAS Compass. And I'm really excited to talk to you about informational interviewing today because it is one of the most effective forms of networking that will help you in your career exploration and research, and also in your job search. First, let's see what informational interviewing looks like. What do you notice about the photos on this slide? I'll give you a second to look at them. So these are all people having informational interviews. So a few things I notice are sort of the balance between informality but professionalism. You can see how people are dressed. You can see their body language. You can see the genuine curiosity through their eye contact and body language. I noticed that some people have notes in front of them, like maybe they're taking notes or sharing documents. A lot of these conversations are happening in person, but I also notice one person talking online. You can tell that these people are having great conversations and making good connections. So this is what an informational interview looks like. Now, what is an informational interview? The definition is that an informational interview is a brief meeting between a person who wants to investigate a career, which would be you, and a person working in that career. You are the interviewer, and the person who is working in that career is the interviewee. Some key features of these informational interviews are, first, they're pretty short, usually 20 to 30 minutes long. They can happen in any modality. So they could be in person, often over coffee. They could be on Zoom. It could be over the phone. But usually, because the person who you're talking to is doing you a bit of a favor by talking to you, you want to leave it up to them for what their preference is for how and when they'd like to meet. Also, you are the interviewer. So that means that you are the one who's leading the conversation in an informational interview. What are the goals of informational interviewing? So informational interviews have both short-term and long-term goals. So in the short term, informational interviews are primarily a research method. It's a way for you to research and learn about career paths, industries, and organizations that are of interest to you by talking to people. They're also a way for you to assess fit for your skills and values in that particular career path, both whether it's a good match for you and also whether there are any skill gaps that you can address in order to make yourself a more competitive candidate in that field. Also, informational interviews are great practice for doing actual job interviews. So you can strengthen your pitch and really practice your interview skills. The person who you're talking to won't necessarily realize that, but for you, it's a really great lower stakes way to practice talking about yourself in this professional yet more informal setting that will help you gain confidence and get really great practice for actual job interviews. Finally, just doing these informational interviews will help improve your job search skills. You can get great tips on what should be in your resume or cover letter, or what can make you a more competitive candidate. So these are some of the short-term goals for these conversations. In the long term, informational interviews are key to building professional relationships and this long-lasting professional community that will help support you throughout the rest of your career. So informational interviewing is a part of networking. It's a key way that you're creating that network, building that network, and then maintaining that network over time is through having these meaningful conversations. They can also be a way to help find out about insider job opportunities. So this is where there are sometimes jobs that aren't necessarily posted, maybe not be posted yet, but through informal informational conversations with people, you can either find out about these opportunities in advance, or through building these relationships, opportunities can be created, or you can help to create potential job opportunities. Okay, so we know what informational interviews are and what the goals are. So who should you invite to these conversations? We always recommend starting with comfortable connections, and comfortable connections are people who you already know. So these might be family or friends who are working in these industries. These might be peers, so people from graduate school or people from undergrad, current classmates, former classmates. They could also be former colleagues or employers, whether you took a break between undergrad and coming to grad school or had any kinds of employment beforehand. These are great people to do informational interviews with. And finally, all of the faculty and administrators who you're meeting on campus here too. You already know them and interact with them in all sorts of ways, but you can think about whether, I'll just give one example, if you're interested in a career in higher ed administration, do an informational interview with a staff member who maybe you've interacted with in another way. Or if you're interested in doing applied research and you know that a faculty member has a relationship with a think tank, set aside a separate meeting to talk to that faculty member about their work with that think tank. Those are all informational interviews. So after you've thought about and contacted your comfortable connections, then move to what we call warm connections. And these are people who you might not know yet, but you almost know because you share some kind of affinity with them. So this could be an alum, maybe from your program, or just another Columbia alum or alum from your undergraduate institution. It could be other members of a professional association that you're a part of. If you're part of a scholarly society or a disciplinary association, it can be anyone who's a member there. Great people to do informational interviews with. Maybe you went to a talk or saw a panel and one of the participants or guest speakers is someone you'd like to get to know further. This person is a warm connection because you've already seen them in person and you have something when you're reaching out to them that you can say they had the shared experience with them. So that's a great person to contact for an informational interview. And finally, second degree LinkedIn connections or first degree connections who you don't actually know yet, but you're just connected with them online. These would also be great people to do an informational interview with. If you're curious about LinkedIn, I encourage you to watch the next module on using LinkedIn to your advantage. Okay, so now that you've decided to do this, you've identified some people to talk to, now it's time to get organized before you even send any of these emails. What I mean by that is you want to make sure that you are keeping on top of who you're talking to, especially sometimes people will decide to do a series of informational interviews with different people. And you just want to make sure that you're organized about who you're talking to, when you're talking to them, so that you can make sure that you're keeping up those relationships and following up. So one great way to do that is to create a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet can also help you with, say, maybe there's an organization you're interested in or an industry you're interested in, you don't know anyone yet. You can use this spreadsheet to also help you keep track of ideas you have about who to reach out to. So create a spreadsheet. Next, update your resume. It's always good to do that in advance. Usually you won't share a resume during the informational interview, but you want to have one ready just in case the person says during the conversation, you know what, share your resume with me and I'll forward it along. You want to be able to follow up with them within a day or two with that resume. So get it ready beforehand. Then prioritize and set goals for outreach. So it's kind of once you have that spreadsheet and a list of a few people you might want to talk to, don't reach out to all of them at once because then you'll be overwhelmed with trying to schedule these conversations. So decide the order in which you're going to reach out to them, and then update your spreadsheet with the dates that you reach out so that you can follow up and keep track of your calendar as well to keep track of these meetings. Okay, so after you've decided who to talk to, you're all organized, it's time to reach out. So the best way to reach out is if you can obtain an email address for the person. So for all of your warm connections, for all of your comfortable connections, I should say, you should probably have their email address or a way of reaching out to them directly. This is a sample email that you would write. So you want to be clear, but also concise in your communication. So a clear email subject, such as request for informational interview. And then when you send the email, it's always appropriate for the very first time you're addressing someone to address them by their last name if you don't know them very well, and an honorific. So like, dear Ms. Jones, dear Dr. Smith. And then you want to be very clear in your message about who you are. So do a very short one-sentence self-introduction. So in this example, dear Ms. Jones, I hope this finds you well. I am a graduate student in the Modern Art MA program at Columbia University, and I am exploring transitioning to a career in media. So that's a one-sentence introduction. Next, how you know them. I noticed your profile on the Columbia Alumni Community website. It could also be, I went to your talk that you gave on campus, 2 weeks ago. And then make it clear what the ask is also at the beginning. So, and I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about your career path and experience. And then this paragraph ends with something very specific to connect why, kind of explain further why you're reaching out to them. So through researching my thesis, which looks at representations of modern art and advertisements, I have become interested in media and advertising as possible career paths. Okay, so that's a very short first paragraph. And then the second paragraph is actually scheduling the conversation. Would you be willing to schedule an informational interview? And so in this case on Zoom, obviously if the person isn't local, you're not going to be meeting in person. So you might say Zoom or phone. And then it would be great if you could spare 20 to 30 minutes at a time that is convenient for you. Sometimes it's even a good idea to be more specific than this and to say sometime in the next 2 weeks, or to even, set some, times, dates that you're available, just to make scheduling even easier. Thank you for considering my request, and I hope we can meet in the near future. So that's a sample email to send. You could also reach out over LinkedIn, depending on the level of profile you have. If you have LinkedIn professional account, then you can, or LinkedIn premium account, then you can send very short in-mail message to someone. You could also, if you don't have, if you just have a LinkedIn basic account, if you're adding someone as a connection, you can personalize the connection request, even with kind of some of this a very short version of introducing yourself and that you'd love connecting with them. And then if they accept your connection request, then you can send them a longer message to try to schedule that informational interview. So this is a great template. I'll say here too that an additional resource I really recommend that you check out is available in our resource library in the GSAS Compass portal. There's a guide to informational interviewing that was produced by the career services team at the University of Pennsylvania, which is really the best guide out there. So they also have some sample language like this that you can use in an outreach email. Okay, so you've reached out, you've set a date, you're going to talk to this person. Now, what do you do to prepare? So the first thing you do is you further research that person's career trajectory and their current position. You should know everything about them that you can find out online. Usually look at their LinkedIn profile, because you want to just be really prepared to know about their background, to know what questions to ask. So the next thing you'll do is you'll write down a list of questions and bring those questions to the meeting. So this might be some general questions, but also you want to, if possible, reference their specific career trajectory when you're asking the question. So to say, oh, I know you've worked at this company for 5 years, can you tell me what that's been like? So something that references their personal background. Next, as I said, you want to have your resume ready in case there's an opportunity to share it afterward. Next, prepare your 1-minute introduction. So remember, you're leading this conversation, and the way you'll open the conversation is to give them a little bit more background about yourself, because before you dive right into questions, it's kind of hard for someone to answer questions if they don't know you or if they don't know kind of where you're coming from. So the best way to start the conversation is by saying, thanks so much for meeting. Let me just start by telling you a little bit about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from. So you want to prepare that. And again, the way you introduce yourself would be, specific to that person. So you'd probably talk about your academic background and then your professional interests as they relate to their own, to their profession and their own career trajectory. Decide where to have the conversation. So obviously, if you've already figured out where to do it in person, then that's already set. If you do it in person, it's best to do it at a place that's convenient for them. So sometimes even if you can do it near their office during the day, that can be really helpful. Maybe like a cafe near their office or something. But if you've already decided that it's going to be online, make sure, if you're talking on the phone, that you have good cell reception, and if it's going to be on Zoom, that you have a strong Wi-Fi connection. And also, this is general interview advice, that if you're doing it on Zoom, make sure that the background, whatever is behind you, is clean and presentable. And if not, use a different background or blur your background. And finally, you do want to wear semi-professional attire. So definitely you don't need to wear a jacket or a tie or to be very formal, but usually you wouldn't want to wear like shorts or jeans. You'd be more kind of business casual when you're having these meetings. Okay, so now during the conversation itself, and again, there's lots of great tips in this guide from University of Pennsylvania, but here is a sample of some of the common questions that you might come in with when you prepare, and the questions that you'd ask the person you're interviewing. So first, how did you get started in this field or position? Next, maybe what is the most rewarding part about your work? What does a typical day, month, year look like in your role? And again, for those initial questions, these are questions that will help you assess the fit and assess whether your background, a question that we get from students a lot in advising appointments is, am I a good candidate for, this kind of career path or this kind of job title? And it's hard to know. And one of the best things you can do to find out the answer to that question is through doing informational interviews. And so if you're asking what's rewarding about your work, you're trying to figure out, do your values match, and the skills that are used too. Like if the person says something that's rewarding that is really surprising to you and doesn't match with what you're looking for, then that's a good indication about fit. When you're asking what does a typical day, month, or year look like, you're trying to figure out, you can see a job description and know a little bit about an industry, but if you were to actually do this job, what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis, or on, what are the cycles like in that industry? Next, what experiences, skills, personality characteristics does your organization look for in new hires? So this will help you research what I was saying before. One of the goals of informational interviewing is to be a better candidate in the field, to learn kind of insider tips. So if you can get this straight from someone, especially if they have any experience as a hiring manager themselves, the answers to these questions can really help you improve your own application or interview. Next, how did you choose this company or position over others? Can give you some great insight. And then the last few questions, where do you see yourself next? That can be an interesting question if you're talking to someone who's more junior. So maybe like someone who's more of a peer or who graduated just a couple of years ahead of you, to give you a sense of mobility in that field. What job search advice would you give to someone in my situation? This can be a pretty open-ended question, so you might want to make it even a little bit more specific about, you could ask like, what skills would you suggest I gain, or where are the best places to look for job postings in this field? Those are kind of more specific examples for asking that question. And then the very last question, which I think is a really great one, and you can either ask it during the conversation itself or afterward in your email follow-up, is, do you have any other contacts you would be willing to connect me with? So with this, you're trying to create that snowball effect where you have one informational interview, and not only does it provide you with all this great information, but maybe you could get even a whole new contact out of it and someone else to talk to afterward. And that's really fantastic if you can do that. So especially if you have a good conversation with someone and a good rapport, to meet some of their other contacts, maybe they work at another company, maybe their job is a little bit different. It's always good to have more connections. So these are just some of the things you might ask about. Again, this is informational interviews are a research method. And when you do interviews as a research method, you really want to think carefully about what you're asking and the kind of information you're looking to get. Okay, now I just want to address really quickly some concerns that I know students have going into informational interviews, and just address them up front. So one is, what if the person doesn't write me back. So you finally do all that research, you find out you're going to invite, you send them the email invitation and they don't respond to you. That can be hard, but it happens. First, I'll just say, don't take it personally. People are so busy and it's hard to manage their communication. So don't take it personally. But if you don't hear back from the person, you should give them some time. A week to 10 days is appropriate to let them catch up on their email. Then respond and say, just very quickly, hi, I just wanted to make sure, just wanted to follow up on my prior email. Would really love to get a chance to talk to you if you have time. Let me know. And then if you don't hear back after that, I would say, don't send them another email. Maybe a few months later, you can follow up again. But it's really, you don't want to make a bad impression by seeming like you're really hounding the person, but you can definitely send that one follow-up email if they don't respond to you the first time. Next, what if this whole thing kind of makes you feel uncomfortable? And that's probably really common. And the answer to this is it's normal for this to feel uncomfortable at first, but it only gets easier and more comfortable the more times you do it. Another great thing to do is to really start with those very, very comfortable connections. So start maybe with an aunt or an uncle or a peer, a friend. So someone who you really are comfortable with, and start with those people who are closest to you, and then branch out to people who are more and more distant, and that'll help you get more comfortable. What if there are awkward silences during the conversation? The best thing you can do is prepare. So prepare more questions than you'll need to ask. And that way you are ready to fill those awkward silences yourself. Next, what if the person gives long, unhelpful answers? So kind of the opposite of that. What if it's if they're droning on and not giving you what you want to know? Let them talk, try not to interrupt them, but then once they're done, try to refocus the conversation by asking another question, another one of your prepared questions, and see if you can, maybe it's just a matter of asking the right question. Next, what if the conversation takes too long? So as I said, these are usually 20 to 30 minutes long. And the answer to that is that it's your responsibility to be keeping track of time. So you really want to, that's where you come in. So if you notice that it's coming up to 30 minutes, say to the person, I know we're running out of time. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And you only want to go over if they are able to, but make sure that you're asking them at that 20 or 30 minute mark, however long you set for the meeting, if you feel like it's going to start going over. So finally, I just want to end with this point, which is that not every informational interview will go perfectly and not every conversation will be helpful. And that's okay. I mean, that's just what it's like in the world when we're meeting people. We don't always hit it off with everyone. And it's totally fine. Just, pick right back up and have another conversation, and probably the next one will be better. You'll get more comfortable and you'll get better at this as you go. But again, sometimes it's just a mismatch, or you realize it's not a good fit, and that's totally okay. And sometimes that information can actually be really helpful to your job search as well. Okay, so to close out here, we'll talk about what to do afterward, after you've had the conversation. So the first thing that's vital is that within 24 hours, you want to send a thank you note. And the thank you note should be brief. Of course, you want to express your gratitude. Also, it's great to say something specific, just so that it shows that you were listening, that you were listening closely. It reflects back to them that that they valued that conversation. And it also just helps to remind them already, like you're planting that seed that's going to be a kernel in their own minds to remember you by. So here's an example. Dear, at this point, you're probably on a first name basis with the person, so you can probably use their first name. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me yesterday. It was a pleasure speaking with you and learning more about your career path. I found, blank particularly interesting, helpful. So it could be, I found, what you said about what you find most rewarding about your work to be interesting or helpful, or I found, what you said about things that hiring managers really value to be very helpful. So it's really nice to reference that and then say, finally, to close, I plan to follow up on that in the next few weeks. Again, it's really nice to know, for them to know that the conversation is going to have an impact like that. Finally, thank you again, and I hope to stay in touch. Kind regards. So short, concise, but also include a little bit of specific detail in that thank you note. And the real key is to make sure you send it within 24 hours after you have the conversation. And you're not done there, because remember that one of the longer term goals of informational interviewing is to build your professional network through these conversations. So in that regard, it's important to stay in touch. So first, in the next few weeks, I say 6 to 8, but it's like it's flexible, but really like within the 2 months after you have the conversation, it's nice to find some reason to reach back out to them, especially if the conversation, and maybe I'll say only if the conversation goes well. So if it's someone who you feel like you want to keep as part of your network, as part of your community, then it's important to do this follow-up. So here are a few ideas of what you could do when you reach back out. You could share something of common interest that's related to something you talked about. You could share an update about yourself, and I think that's a really good one. So obviously, like, you know, if you get a job or if there's any progress in your job search, to say, you know, I got an interview, or this helped me, you know, in this or this or this or that, just to share an update about that, and to tell them how, you know, thank them for it, that, you know, because, you know, you helped, your conversation was so helpful, and as a result, you know, this great thing happened. Another thing you could do is to ask a quick question referencing the conversation that you had. You could also, as I mentioned too, asking if they have any other contacts. So this could be, you know, maybe you send that initial thank you email, and then a month later, you say, you reach back out to them and say, oh, you know, again, I keep thinking about our conversation. It was so helpful. And you told me about, you know, how you used to work at this other company. Is there anyone you still are in touch with there who you might be able to connect me with, or who you could recommend that I reach out to? So that's another thing you could reach back out with. And then finally, again, if this is like the real long game here, but if you're trying to keep this person as part of your network, you do want to reach out, say every 3 to 4 months, but it doesn't even have to be that often. It could be every 6 months. It could be yearly. Sometimes people start sending out like holiday messages or New Year's messages to people. This is really thinking very long-term here, but just to keep these people in your network, it does take time and effort and cultivation. So, you know, think about, is there an update? Do you just want to check in and send your well wishes? And it's also a great idea to keep a record of that correspondence, going back to that getting organized and creating a spreadsheet, just so you can, you know, make sure that, especially those people who you want to keep close to you, that you're staying on top of that communication. And that's it. So thanks so much for joining for this, this session on conducting an informational interview. Your assignment after this is to go out and have an informational interview. Again, they're so effective, such great research tools and such great tools for building your professional community. So I hope that this session helped to make it a little clearer how to do an informational interview, and that you feel a little bit more confident in reaching out and doing it. So thank you again for joining us today, and I hope that you will watch the other sections in this module on networking.